women who felt the need to educate themselves on local issues so they could be better equipped to participate in democracy. We continue this today, more than a century later, and we'd love to have you as a member. In the meantime, thanks for joining us tonight for an important program about fair legislative and congressional districts in Ohio. This program is presented by Women's City Club's Program Committee and co-sponsored by the ACLU, Cincinnati Association, Fair Districts, Greater Cincinnati Voters Collaborative, Jewish Community Relations Council, the League of Women Voters of the Cincinnati area, Mount Auburn Presbyterian Church, and the YWCA. If I left anyone out, please speak up. Okay. I want to thank Amy Katzman, who organized this program, Jeff Dye, VP for Programs, Sarah Gideons, our Communications Chair, and Donna Tukel, our Communications Manager, for their efforts in bringing this program to us tonight. We all know that gerrymandering is a huge problem, creating voting districts that are lopsided, non-competitive, and unfair. Fortunately, Ohio voters supported constitutional amendments in 2015 and 2018 to adopt new processes for drawing district boundaries that encourage bipartisan mapmaking. Tonight's program is very timely because Ohio's new bipartisan redistricting commission will meet tomorrow morning for the very first time. So let's get up to speed on this. We have two fantastic speakers tonight who will share what they know, and Amy Katzman will now introduce them. Thank you, Amy.
Well, thank you, Beth. The quality of our speakers, I think, reflects the importance of this issue and of our doing something moving forward. We have two very involved in community issues speakers. We have Patricia Whitberg, who has her PhD from University of Chicago. She's a retired professor of sociology at Indiana University, and she now has a research association with Georgetown University. She's been a member of Common Cause since its founding and is now on a Common Cause board. We also have Antoinette Isimus, who spent 3 decades as director of administrative departments at UC, Jewish Hospital, and Tri-Health, and followed that out with 2 more decades facilitating workshops, coaching, and consulting. She volunteers with numerous community organizations, but relevant for tonight is her volunteer work with Ohio Voter Rights Coalition, Bold New Democracy, Cincinnati Indivisible Rapid Response, which I didn't know anything about.
Oh, wow.
And she's also decided to join the Fair District Speakers Bureau because of the importance of this matter. So thank you both. And both have divided up the presentation, so lead on.
Okay, I'm going to attempt to share there it goes. Very good. I never quite trust these things. One slight difference from that, I'm not currently the member of a board. I was the secretary treasurer of Common Cause Indiana for a good hunk of the time that I taught there, but I have not been, I'm not on an Ohio board at that time. Anyway, thank you for realizing the importance of this. She says, okay, and why isn't it going down? Oh, there we go. Okay, so I'm all right with this. Okay, obviously the up and down buttons don't work, but my mouse does. Oh, noble mouse. Okay, so Fair Districts is the Ohio's leading nonpartisan redistricting advocates. It's led by the League of Women Voters of Ohio and Common Cause of Ohio. But it also includes the ACLU, Ohio Council of Churches, A. Philip Randolph Institute, Ohio Voter Rights Coalition, and a lot of other ones too. As Beth already told you, we Ohioans voted twice, once in 2015 and once in 2018 for redistricting reform. Both times those passed overwhelmingly with 70% of the votes in all 88 of Ohio's counties. And so now of course, they didn't go into effect as you'll find out later on in this presentation when Antoinette talks, until the new census comes out. But now is the time, now when the census is coming out and the new maps are being made, that we need to get involved and engaged with this fight. So tonight, whoops, I still have to get used to this mouse. I'm used to little up and down arrows. I'm going to do the first two, and Antoinette's going to do the second two. Okay, I'm assuming that most of you kind of know this, but every 10 years, Congress is mandated to reapportion the 435 roughly equal congressional districts. Back in 1790, each member of Congress represented about 34,000 people. And they kept just adding, every time a state got another 34,000 people, they added another person in the House of Representatives. And it got unwieldy rather quickly. And so they capped it at 435 and said, from now on, every 10 years, different states will gain or lose representatives, according to that. The very small states like North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Vermont over here, Delaware, Arkansas, every state has to get at least one congressperson for the House of Representatives. But states like California, obviously, Texas, Florida, have many because they're much more populous. And depending on whether or not the state gains or loses, Ohio lost a congressional seat this year, not necessarily because we didn't grow, we did, but we didn't grow as fast as Texas did. You know, so what this means is that Ohio is going to have to redraw its congressional districts to go from 16 to 15. And that's the process that we're watching. That's what this whole thing's about. I keep forgetting. Okay, there we go. The Ohio House and the Ohio Senate districts are mandated by the Ohio Constitution. They're also capped. 33 senators, 99 representatives. And so with each decennial census, they redraw these maps in order to account for the fact that, you know, initially maybe all the different Ohio Senate districts, Ohio House districts were equal in population, but over time people moved to one of them and left others. And so you have to redraw them again so that the districts are again roughly equal. Drawing district lines is an opportunity to grab power, as many of you probably already know. We put cats and dogs so that we wouldn't be bothering anybody by calling them Democrats or Republicans or Reds and Blues or whatever. But if you have, for example, a population of 20 cats and 30 dogs, and you have to draw districts, you can, of course, get perfect representation by putting all the cats in 2 districts and all the dogs in 3. And that would be, they would represent the percentage of cats and dogs in this area. But my personal belief is it's kind of, you know, the cats would never get a chance to talk to the dogs would never get a chance to talk to the cats. And, you know, might cause polarization and various and sundry things. If the dogs have power, they might want to crack the cats and put a small number in each of their districts so that they will always be, that every single district will be dominated by dogs. On the other hand, if the cats have the power, they will try packing as many dogs as they can into 2 districts and then cracking off the rest and sticking them in districts that are majority cats. And by doing that, the cats, even though they're the minority, can end up with 3 cat districts. You know. So anyway, nasty cats for doing that. Okay, you probably remember from high school civics or something, gerrymandering's been around forever. And it was originally named because there was a guy named Eldridge Gerry who managed to get his district drawn in such a way as to get all of his voters and assure that he would get reelected. Some genius of a editorial cartoonist way back in the 19th century thought that his weirdly shaped district looked like a salamander. And so he published this cartoon calling it a gerrymander. I personally think it looks more like a dragon, but gerrymandering is what it's been called ever since. There are problems with this. It creates safe districts and predictable outcomes. So that there are certain districts that the Republicans always going to win, or the Democrats always going to win. First of all, this creates disengaged voters. I mean, why on earth would you bother voting if you already knew that the Democrats are going to win this district or the Republicans are? Why would you even bother? It also creates unresponsive officials, both to the minority party. One of the people that I've presented with in the past shared a vignette where he said he went to his elected official and asked for something, and the guy literally told him, "I don't have to listen to you. My district is majority party X and your party Y, and it doesn't matter to me what you say. It doesn't matter to me what you care, because no matter what you say or what you care, I know I'm still going to get reelected." At least the guy was honest. Another thing, the problem with this is the primary becomes the most important contest. And what this does is not that many people vote in the primaries. And the people that vote are the most engaged and that they have the largest axe to grind. What this tends to do is the most Republicans and the most Democratic Democrats tend to vote. It pushes both parties toward the farthest right or the farthest left candidates. And so, first of all, it's bad for your own party. Because I did this once to it was a Chamber of Commerce. My guess is probably most of them were Republicans, but I said, what happens is that the most extreme candidates get elected, and then they become the face of the party. So all the Republicans look at the Democrats and say, "Oh boy, you folks, you all are radical leftists like that Anastasio Ocasio-Cortez, Meanwhile, all the Democrats are looking at the Republicans and saying, "You folks are a bunch of rabidly rightist, racist people, that believe in weird things like Marjorie Taylor Greene, And both of these, I watched when I said this, I watched all of the people on the presentation cringe, because the last thing they wanted to do was to be identified with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Thank you very much. So it gives it puts a bad face on your party. It leads to extreme candidates who have no incentive whatsoever to compromise. And so then nothing gets done. Dysfunctional government serves no one. It becomes impossible to make progress on any issue of importance to constituents. Okay, Ohio's congressional map. This is currently, as I said, we have 16 districts. This is going to have to be redrawn because we have to cram it down to 15 somehow. In 2011, Ohio's map makers designed the congressional map to guarantee 12 Republican seats and 4 Democratic seats. Even during waves of, when a lot of Democrats win in a state, more Democrats vote or whatever, the state will go, it has ever since 2011, it has gone, the safe Republican seats have remained safe Republican. The safe Democratic seats have remained safe Democratic. Ensuring this could be done, it was done only by drawing some really oddly shaped districts, or splitting poor Summit County into 4 different districts, And this has gotten even more sophisticated. It's always been done. It's been done since the early 1800s. It's done by both Democrats and Republicans when they get into power. But it didn't used to be so easy. But now that we have computers, they can do things that they weren't able to do before. Okay, so predictable results. Ohio, okay, whenever Ohio votes statewide for a statewide office, like the governor or the senators, Ohio usually votes, it's a slightly red state, 55% Republican, 45% Democrat. But as you can see from these pie charts, the gerrymandering is such that in our congressional elections, 75% of our Congress people are Republican, which is way overrepresented and compared to the normal, Similarly with this, the state house elections are the same. Okay, the party that holds the power, as it says, to draw the districts will draw districts so that they will win. And this, as I said, this happens no matter, here it's the Republicans that win, but not necessarily in Maryland, for example. It leads to some very weirdly shaped districts. This is Congressional District 9, the Snake on the Lake. This was drawn in 2011 deliberately to get either Marcy Kaptur of Toledo or Dennis Kucinich of Cleveland out of office. You know, to get rid of one of the two Democrats. And so by chopping little pieces of Cleveland off, basically what you have here is this long stringy district that's held by Marcy Kaptur, who admits that she doesn't know a whole lot about Cleveland. And who also, if she ever wants to get there, she has to drive through water, or which is hard on her car, or leave the district. The areas are very, very different. Cuyahoga County with Cleveland it has a lot of science and medicine jobs and people that are interested in that. Very few farmers. Meanwhile, of course, Ottawa County, which is somewhere in here, I suppose, has a lot of farmers and very few people in computer science. And so what you end up with, she has to represent all these people who have very, very different interests, very, very, very different needs to be understood. And she admits to herself that it's just not possible to be a good representative to all of these different kinds of people. Okay, and then of course, if you're more familiar, this is Cincinnati, of course, and this is the infamous Congressional District 1. Congressional District 1 originally, in 2010, Hamilton County had 8,002 residents, and it could have been just one district, because they, you know, every congressional district had to have 711,000 residents, and Hamilton County had that easily. But if Hamilton County was all one district, maybe with a couple little pieces chopped off, you know, it would have been largely Democratic. And so it was, first of all, Hamilton County was cracked in half. And then all of Warren County was added to this. With computers, it can be so carefully drawn. This is the West North Bend Road between Ridgeland and Merle Avenue, if you figure out where that is. And it's right here on this map, in case you're wondering. And this is literally one little tongue of CD2 in with Congressional District 1. It's drawn that way in order to keep people, the computers enable this to be done that finely. The picture of Xavier basketball game is here because if you go to a basketball game at Xavier University, while you're in the stadium, you're in Congressional District 1, but the parking lot's in Congressional District 2. You know, it's that weird, it's weirdly drawn like this by, you know, with the aid of computers now, they can be this fine-grained, deliberately to keep one party in power. Here you have Congressional District 15, which was drawn this way in order to split up Franklin County, which is where Columbus is. Before the 2011 redistricting process, Congressional District 15 was competitive and only encompassed 3 counties. But in order to ensure that it would be securely Republican, they had to split more communities and add voters from more conservative counties. So now Congressional District 15 stretches from Madison all the way to Athens counties. And it takes a piece of Franklin County off in order to crack off a certain number of the minority party. There are very different economic needs among constituents. In Franklin County, college graduates outnumber those without a high school diploma 4 to 1. But in Athens County, or excuse me, Vinton, better, Athens got Ohio U. In Vinton County, more people lack a high school diploma than those with college degrees. You know, similarly, the median household income in Franklin County is well above the state average, while some of these it's way below. You know, how can one representative represent all those diverse interests? It disenfranchises someone. I think I'm done, because I think this is where I think this is where Antoinette starts, if I remember.
Yes.
Is that not case?
Great.
There you go. All right. So Antoinette
Okay,
starts.
thank you,
And
Pat.
Antoinette, tell me when to change.
I will. Thank you
All right.
very much. And so the question is, where are we now? Well, nothing has changed yet. We are still functioning from the district maps that were created in 2011. And this is the year that the new maps will be created. And the first time we will have new voting districts will be in the November 2022 election. So about a year from this November is when we'll actually have our new maps in place and we'll be voting in from our new districts. The important thing to consider here is that we're lucky in this process, which is happening now. It's beginning now. We're lucky to have new rules. And that makes Ohio different from some of the other states that have no rules at all. So these new rules are thanks to our efforts as citizens, those of us who worked really hard to gather signatures on petitions and get 2 ballot initiatives, as Pat mentioned earlier, one in 2015 to create the rules for the state legislative districts, those that we vote to send to Columbus. And again, we did this in 2017 and voted on it in 2018 for the congressional districts, the people that we send to the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. And the really good news with this is that these reforms passed in all 88 counties with over 70% of the vote. So we're going to look over in these next slides some of the rules that are going to govern this entire process. There are new rules that govern both the Ohio House and Senate and the U.S. congressional maps for our representatives in Washington, D.C. And an important rule is that the districts that are created must be contiguous. And I looked up the definition of contiguous, and that means that there is a connecting boundary or they're next to each other. So you can see in this far left square how the District 1 and District 2 are next to each other. That the rule requires that the districts that they may not be contiguous, which is the second square. You can see how a portion of District 2 is plunked into District 1 and therefore separated. They're not aligned. And in the third square, you can see where District 1 is totally subsumed or covered and surrounded by District 1. So the rule also says there can be no donuts, where you leave a hole in a district or you smother another district by totally surrounding it. So these new rules will be keeping counties, cities, and townships whole, which is really important because you think of our counties and they are composed of our counties, cities, and townships. And I think this final bullet point here is a really important one, and that is that public hearings are required. Now with these 2 amendments that were passed to the Constitution, our Ohio Constitution requires at least 3 public hearings for the state legislative maps after a plan or proposed map is introduced, and at least two hearings are required after the congressional maps are developed and introduced for consideration. So another piece of this is that Ohio's open meetings law requires this convening to be public. And so one of the ways that all of us can be engaged is to push for more extensive public hearings outside of Columbus. And given the pandemic and now the increase with the Delta variant that's happening, even for virtual hearings, to really support transparency, the opportunity for us to have our voices heard, and for us to watch how things are transpire and how the maps are created. Next slide, Pat. So here are some of the rules for just the Ohio House and Senate maps. This is one it's pretty important. They call it nesting, so that each Ohio Senate district must consist of 3 contiguous Ohio House districts. There's also the anti-gerrymandering rule, which is going to be enforced, and that is that no plan shall be drawn to favor or disfavor a political party. And as Pat said earlier, when the Democrats were in power, they loved gerrymandering and did it, and the Republicans likewise.
And then there's a lawsuit you can do if somebody says, oh, yeah, yes, you did draw it to favor, there will be lawsuits. So
correct. And so one of the really important rules too is our rule requiring representational fairness, and that is unique. And it's, again, if you think back to the pie charts that Pat talked about, where representationally, Ohio voters are about 55% Republican and 45% Democrat. And yet when you look at our congressional districts, you can see that of the 16 districts we've been voting from for the past 10 years, 12 of those are Republican and only 4 of them are Democrat. And likewise, in the state legislature, it's more like a 2/3, 1/3 distribution, with 2/3 Republicans to 1/3 Democrats. And that's really out of alignment with the representational breakdown of party distribution in the state. So that's a new rule, a new change, that representational fairness has to be looked at and honored in drawing these maps. In the congressional district, let's see, if you go back one, Pat. Oh, okay, no, you're right. Okay, terrific. So the Ohio Redistricting Commission is the body that will draw the maps for our Columbus State House, of the House and Senate district maps. And there are 7 members, the governor, our auditor, Keith Faber, the Ohio Secretary of State, and then there will be an appointee by both the Speaker of the House and the Minority Leader of the House, and also an appointee by the Senate President and the Senate Minority Leader. And so this way, there will definitely be 2 Democrats on this redistricting commission. Now, the leaders, the minority and majority leaders, have the option to appoint someone, or they could also choose to keep that role for themselves. So tomorrow we'll find out, hopefully. And next slide. So the seats that we have in Washington, D.C. also have new rules for drawing the maps. And these new rules really rein in the worst excesses of gerrymandering by demanding bipartisan map making, having limits on the number of splits, and also, again, transparency and that key about public participation. And all of these factors, especially transparency and public participation, must be maintained despite the new census schedule. So next slide. So here is a good slide talking about the splits. And again, these are for the congressional districts in Washington, D.C. But one of the good points of these rules is that the redistrict for congressional redistricting, it emphasizes the counties as political building blocks. And so Pat showed you a number of instances in the 2011 redistricting where counties were split up and combined. And the new rules are stating that at least 65 of our 88 counties must be contained entirely within a district. And then they do allow some splitting, but again, they have guardrails and are containing this cracking of counties. So up to 18 counties may only be split once into 2 districts, and up to 5 counties may be split not more than twice into 3 districts. And there is no requirement saying they have to do those kinds of splits. So for example, there could be more than 65 counties held intact, and there could be fewer than 18 counties split into 2 districts, and or fewer than 5 counties split in among 3 districts. So many of our current maps just would not be possible for with these new rules, and we're fortunate that this is how we will be going forward. So here's some examples of what you just can't do anymore. For example, as Pat mentioned earlier, Mercer County was split up into 3 congressional districts. And then over here, poor Summit County got chopped up 4 times. And then I think a really interesting situation is District 16, which contains all of Wayne County, 1 county, and then parts of 5 other counties. So you can see by this wacko shape that there was some real cunning put into putting as many voters of the same type into 1 district as possible. Additional things that will not be able to happen. For example, Cuyahoga, Franklin, and Hamilton County have enough population so they can be held intact and have 1 congressional district completely in each county, rather than being combined as Hamilton County is right now with Warren County. Unfortunately, Columbus must be split because the population there is larger than the size. I believe it's 720,000 people in each congressional district that will be allowed. And Columbus is a really big population. Thanks, Pat. Next slide. This is the flow chart, which I have a lot of fun talking about. And this is the, whoops, going back to the flow chart. There we go. This is the process that will be used to create the congressional maps for Washington, D.C. So these will be our new House of Representatives. So in stage 1, the Ohio legislature, the General Assembly, so it's both houses, will lead the process for drawing these maps. According to the amendment to the Constitution, they have until September 30th. But we aren't really sure about any of the dates that you see at the bottom of these because of the delay in the census data. But they have a deadline. We're not sure exactly what that is, to pass a map with the support of 60% of members from both chambers, including the support of 50% of Democrats in the House and Senate. For this, 2 public hearings are required before the map is adopted, and the governor may veto the map. If the legislature adopts a map and the governor does not veto it, then that map will last for 10 years. If that doesn't happen, Then they move on to step 2. And so this is when the redistricting commission that we talked about before will come into play. And they will be charged with adopting a map. The original deadline is by October 31st. Again, we're not sure if that's exactly when it would be. But they would adopt a map that has the support of a majority of the members. So it has to be a 4-7 vote with a simple majority. But the advantage of this is that it would include both Democrats. It has to include both Democrats. And again, 2 public hearings are required before adoption. And if this map is adopted, it would last for 10 years. But if this stage fails, then the process moves on to stage 3. That's when it goes back to the General Assembly. And they have another deadline here. It says November 30th. Again, it's uncertain, but they can adopt a map with at least 60% of members from both chambers, and this time including 1/3 of the Democrats. In the first stage, it was 50%. Now it's down to 1/3. Again, 2 public hearings are required before the map is adopted, and the governor has veto power over this. Again, if this map is adopted, it would last for 10 years. Now, if this stage fails, then it goes to stage 4. And in stage 4, the General Assembly can pass a map with a simple majority of their members, and it would be only a 4-year plan. But the map that they pass must meet specific requirements. They must meet the contiguity and compactness requirement. They must meet the requirement to keep the 65 counties whole, and then the other splits that I described before. The map drawers people drawing the map can decide which counties would get split. They also any the map drawers would attempt to they're required to attempt to include at least 1 whole county in each congressional district, unless it would otherwise violate federal law, which would be our voting rights laws. And any maps that are passed with a simple majority must make sure that there's no partisan gerrymander, no undue splitting of political subdivisions. They must attempt compactness, and they must release a statement explaining how they met these criteria. So if this happens, then this is a 4-year map. It's not a 10-year map. And so if this 4-year map would get passed by the legislature through this process, then they must reconvene and pass another map with a majority of legislatures that would last for 6 years. So you can see it's a complex process. I'm rooting for stage 1 to be successful. I've heard through various sources that some of the leaders of the House and Senate are rooting for stage 4 to be what happens, because there would be some definite advantages in the 2022 election for that group. But another good point is that these maps can be referendumed. So there would be 90 days to collect signatures and put an initiative rejecting the map on the ballot. And another requirement is that these maps could end up at the Ohio Supreme Court. But it's really critical that in this stage 4, that even more stronger than in the other stages, that there are protections against drawing district lines to favor or disfavor one political party over the other, or any candidates or incumbents. As I said, maintain compactness, and then also include that explanation of how they are complying with these regulations. So next slide. Okay, the census. This new schedule is instead of March, when we were originally supposed to get our data, all states would have gotten it then. Well, we are now going to get it this month. I've heard it August 15th or 16th. And then the data will go to Ohio University, which will take the data, do the analytical work to it, and prepare it to be user-friendly for the mapping process. And so it's not really clear how long that process at Ohio University is going to take, or if Ohio will still be able to meet those map deadlines that you saw earlier. But the stance that Fair Districts is taking is that the map makers shouldn't really wait for the data to begin hosting public hearings or use this timeline as an excuse to hurry up and rush through the process once they do get the data, but to honor the transparency and the requirement for public participation and bipartisanship. So, next slide. So as far as what do we do about our deadlines, it's given the new timeline of just getting the data this month and the work that needs to be done at Ohio University, it's really impossible for Ohio to meet the deadlines. And so there was an idea of passing a constitutional amendment to create new deadlines, but then that was dropped. There is the possibility of going to the Ohio Supreme Court for leniency in meeting the deadlines or creating new timeline. And there was the Ohio Secretary of State and Attorney General did file a lawsuit to compel the Census Bureau to deliver data to Ohio in time to meet our constitutional deadlines, but then that was dropped because the CDC, or the Census Bureau, not the CDC, the Census Bureau said, you know, they just couldn't do what they couldn't do. They couldn't have it ready any sooner than they're going to be able to do it. But again, while there are different ways to handle this delay, the most important thing is to ensure that there is enough time for public oversight and input so that we will know what is happening. So next slide. And this is the good, exciting news. I know it has been mentioned early in the meeting, and I'm just really excited about this because I know a lot of people who have been writing postcards, emails, letters to the editor, letters and phone calls to the governor, urging him to convene the Ohio Redistricting Commission. And on Tuesday of this week, he did. And as it was mentioned earlier, the first meeting is tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in the Senate Finance Hearing Room at the State House. You're all invited to attend. I know it's kind of late notice to make a trip up to Columbus, but with this group, I wouldn't be surprised if some people are going to do that. However, if trekking all the way to Columbus is more than you can handle tomorrow morning by 9 o'clock in the morning, you will be able to, all of us will be able to watch the live stream on the Ohio channel. And I had asked Alice to put the link at the bottom of this slide. You see, sign up here if you intend to, oh no, I'm sorry. I had asked Alice to put in the link to the Ohio channel. So you can copy that, put it in your browser, get a good cup of coffee and watch the first meeting of the Redistricting Commission tomorrow morning. They're anticipating that they'll be doing mostly administrative things in this first meeting. Those appointments that I mentioned earlier by the majority and minority leaders in the House and Senate will be made. And we're anticipating that the schedule for the public hearings will be announced. And again, participation in the public hearings is our most important opportunity to influence this process. So it's time now to get your testimony ready. How is redistricting important to you? How has gerrymandering impacted you as a citizen, as a voter? And at the bottom of this slide, you can see there's a link that Alice is putting into the chat where you can sign up if you intend to present testimony at a public hearing on redistricting. And then there's two more links that she'll be putting in about 2 sessions that you can get some support and learn what to include in your testimony. So it'll be support on writing your testimony. So I hope you'll all join into this effort. It's really important. Next slide, Pat. Thank you. So here it is. I don't know. I agree with Pat. I don't know if it's a dragon or a salamander, or this looks like a huge, scary snake. But if you remember back to 2019, there was a case of gerrymandering in the state of North Carolina that actually the League of Women Voters started researching there and brought forward as a lawsuit beginning already in 2016. And then by 2018, Common Cause had also submitted a suit. And it was in 2019 that the majority of the US Supreme Court in Recho versus Common Cause decided that, yeah, gerrymandering is unfair, but nothing they can do about it. So they threw it back to the states, asking all states that are concerned about gerrymandering to go back to our local legislature to fix it. And so both our state legislative and congressional maps can be challenged in our Ohio Supreme Court. And I think one of the things that we're really fortunate about is that Ohio is in much better shape than states like Wisconsin that does not have rules keeping communities together and rules about creating more transparent map making. So it's not as dire that as other states are facing. It's also not optimal. But so there is hope. And I think one of the things we Ohioans have recognized is that partisan gerrymanders in all of these states deprive citizens of our most fundamental constitutional right. And that's the rights to participate equally in the political process, to join with our community members to advance our political beliefs and to choose our political representatives rather than the other way around of our representatives choosing us. So next slide, Pat. So here's how I've already invited you to check out the Redistricting Commission meeting tomorrow, but there's more to do. There are many, many ways that you can get involved. And I know this group is a good group of doers. So I'm hoping that if those of you who are not yet engaged, because I know there are a number of you who are very involved, there are very many things to do. A big action is to tell map makers and legislators to get to work on redistricting while we're waiting for the census data. We're only waiting a couple more weeks, but it's really important. Sending letters, writing letters to the editor about why the map makers need to get busy and do this. Next slide. Even more personally, this is the postcard, all the postcards I had sent over a series of weeks. And I know, I believe I heard recently 55,000 of these postcards have been sent. So I'm hoping they noticed all of this, and maybe that was maybe we can credit the postcards to why the governor convened the redistricting commission this week. I'd like to think that anyway. But the intention is to continue sending postcards through the rest of the summer and into the early fall. There are also yard signs. And I know 7,500 of these yard signs have already been distributed, and there's another big batch that are being printed. Fair Districts Ohio got funding for more of these yard signs. So if you would like to write postcards, or if you would want to post a yard sign or know somebody who would want to do that, there will be links that Alice is posting in the chat. And then also you'll receive an email from Woman City Club. All of those who registered for tonight, you'll get a follow-up email, which will have this full slide presentation and all of the links that we've mentioned tonight with all of these action steps. So find your favorites, start with one or two, and step into the participation. Next slide, Pat. Thank you. Another really important opportunity is donate. And I think if you are like me, you probably get about 15 requests a day for donations to help out in some way. There will be a link that you'll receive, and it's also going to be in the chat. Any donation you can make, even if it's a few dollars or a big donation of a lot of dollars, it helps with materials, postcards, stamps, printing yard signs, and also helping to fund staff time to work with all of us who are Fair Districts volunteers. And next slide. I think it's really important when this first line up here where it says stay informed. I think it's really, really important for us beginning in this moment right now to really keep our ears perked and watch for what's happening with the redistricting process, and to spread the word. Share this information with your friends. If you would be interested in giving presentations, you can sign up for the Speakers Bureau. If you know a group that would like to hear a presentation, there's also a link to request a presentation. Again, this process of watchdogging, to really pay attention to the legislators and the redistricting commission, to hold them accountable and make sure that they're really following the rules that are law and mandated in our Constitution now. And again, demanding virtual testimony. There are two bills that have been submitted. They're one in the Ohio State House, and the other in the Ohio Senate, calling for virtual testimony. It's not only in times of pandemic that would be really helpful. It's all the time. Some people have to make a round trip drive of 5 hours if they would like to be active and participate in their role as citizen advocate. So if virtual testimony would be approved, that would really increase opportunities for all of us to participate in our government. Next slide. Community map making. And people wonder, well, why would I want to make up a map as a community member? Well, there are two things you could do. You could learn to facilitate map making, or you could join as someone who wants to help make a community map. And the importance of this is to help identify what your community is and what makes your community unique, so that this can be contributed to helping keep communities intact and together. And so that's the value of this. It's not that they will necessarily be used in the computer map making process that Pat described earlier, but it will be influential to know that what communities consider themselves to be, and then possibly even for further legal action, presenting in court actions at a later point. There is a map making competition being planned, I believe, again, when school starts, possibly getting high school students and maybe middle school students involved. There's an easy to use software package called DistrictR. And there's a transparency team. There's a link that if you'd like to sign up for that. Next slide. And so these are all slides to support you. If I know many of you in this group are very knowledgeable already, but if you want to learn even more, or if there's a particular aspect of redistricting that you're not quite sure of, here are some resources you can check out, very trustworthy ones. And we hope that you'll do that. And again, share this information with others. I'm excited to be here with you tonight. I love knowing what an enthusiastic and engaged audience you are. And I hope that you'll take on one more thing to do and help with this redistricting process. So thank you so much.
Are there any questions or any, I don't know if we have time, but if there are questions, whoops, I guess I'm not screen sharing anymore. I can do that. All right. Sorry. Are there any questions?
I have two rather unrelated questions. First of all, how long should Ohio University take to synthesize the census data? And secondly, what recourse do we have in the courts if the legislature does not follow these procedures?
For the first one, I'm not too sure that we know how long, but there will be pressure again, and we should, to do, you're balancing, of course, the pressure to have this done in a timely fashion and having it done well. I honestly don't know about the first one. I don't know. Annette, do you know? Antoinette, do you know?
No, I have not heard any information. I think they respect that it's going to take a set amount of time. And of course, we want to make sure that it's done in a way that it will be usable and valid information. But I've not read or heard anything that's given an actual timeline to Ohio University. But Sarah, you had your hand up. Do you have some information about that? No.
You're
okay.
on mute.
Okay.
Okay.
And then regarding, could you repeat your second question?
The second one.
Yes, if the legislature does not follow these guidelines, what recourse do we have in the courts?
In addition to the referendum piece that people can collect signatures, there already are a certain number of nonprofits, political kind of groups that are preparing, not so much to sue as soon as it comes out, but preparing the groundwork for, if this comes out and it is blatantly, gerrymandered again, they'll have the first steps already made so that they can file a lawsuit immediately. I'm sure also that Fair Districts, that the League of Women Voters, at Common Cause, if Common Cause can bring a lawsuit in the Carolinas against, and take it all the way to the Supreme Court, Common Cause Ohio would certainly do the same thing. So there are organizations. First of all, there's organizations, Common Cause and League of Women Voters are not one of them, but there are organizations already who are a little more suspicious on one side or the other that are preparing the groundwork for precisely for that.
And to add to what Pat just said, one reason again for the community groups or individuals and community groups to do the mapping process, identifying what it is that makes up their community, is again gathering data that could be brought into court cases to say, well, you're saying with this map that this community can be split here, but look, from the community's voice itself, this is where you've split it in half and you're destroying the integrity of that group. So that's part of all
the maps, even the ones drawn by 7th graders, they're going, the program, the computer to use to do this archives them. And so that if somebody does split, does one of those crazy things like Xavier University's parking lot being in one district and, if they split up, something like that, or, your district goes right through my front yard or whatever, those maps will be there and they will be used as evidence that the people that you're splitting up consider themselves to be one community.
And I live in College Hill, and one of my neighbors gave some testimony, and I know her. And the situation she lives with is that her house was gerrymandered right down the middle. The east side of her house is in one district, and the west side of her house is in another district. And so if she tries to communicate with her congressional representative, she is only given access to Brad Wenstrup in District 2. But when she goes to vote for her congressional representative, only Steve Shabbat's name is on the ballot. So she had to work really closely with the Board of Elections to figure out, what district am I in, since her house is split by the last gerrymandering map.
And if
So it matters which bedroom she sleeps in.
True, that's true.
And if you follow the links that you're going to be given, and you do subscribe to the Fair Districts newsletter and stuff, believe me, if there's a lawsuit, you will know.
I just wanted to mention that I went to one huddle and the ACLU representative specifically said that a legal opinion that in which they didn't prevail mentioned that there wasn't enough evidence of what the appropriate map would be on the other side. And I inferred from him that was one of the reasons they wanted us to make maps, so that there'd be an abundance of material for the court to see existed.
Yeah, of evidence that Mercer County is really all one, these folks feel more closely tied to each other, and Anna and Minster and all those little Mercer County towns than they do to Dayton or, some of the other, to split Mercer County in three pieces and stick them with Dayton or with Toledo or wherever, hopefully we would have those maps that you draw, if you choose to draw them, even the ones drawn by 7th graders, they are data.
And it sounded like he was specifically responding to some of the legal issues that had failed,
Sure.
that
Yeah.
they wanted it. And
Yeah,
clearly,
I like to think, I may be naive, I like to think that, for a minute there, the head of the Senate and of the House, I forget which, in Columbus, actually said, oh, well, since we won't get the census data in time to have all of this long, complicated, step 1, 2, 3, and 4 that Antoinette went over, I think that just the legislature should draw the districts. And there was an explosion coordinated by Fair Districts and, Common Cause and League of Women Voters, writing and saying, how dare you say that? How dare you, and I wrote a letter. This is hard to explain. I wrote a letter to the editor that wasn't in a letter to the editor, if that makes any sense. I wasn't intending for it to be printed in a letter to the editor column. I was intending it to write to the editors and say, I want you to be sure to follow this issue. This is important. They're trying to take, two really popular, reforms away. And they printed the whole letter to the editor, which I wasn't intending to be a letter. Never mind, you get the idea. And I like to think that that the explosion of indignation that people sent via the postcards, via the letters to the editor, maybe even mine, that attempt to take our power away from us and put it back in the legislators so they can draw their own boundaries again, failed. And I like to think it was because of our activism that it was so. So we have to keep their feet to the fire.
True. And Alice, I was wondering if there were any questions in the chat that we could address.
And you're on mute. You're mute.
Not so far. No questions in the chat.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Claire Williams.
Hi, Antoinette. You mentioned that for congressional districts, the target population per district would be 720,000, I think, if
It's
I'm.
700,000 and something. I'll look it up. I've got it.
What is
711,000 people.
the bandwidth that will be a reasonable range, plus or minus that number? Because I know Hamilton County has more than 711,000 people. Does that mean that we can definitely count on some part of Hamilton County being thrown out to another county? Or could it be 711 up to 750? Or what's the reasonable range? Is it written right into the rules, or is this something that will be worked out through the hearing process?
Yeah, that is really a good question. From what I've read, it is as much as 720,000, and that Hamilton County would be kept intact as a county, which would change the political makeup significantly of District 1. Of course, you know, as Pat said earlier, Ohio has lost a district. And so instead of 16 districts, we'll have 15. So it's really going to be interesting now to see how they craft 15 districts out of what they had previously divided up into 16. Given what we know in this moment, it is the intention to keep Cuyahoga and Hamilton County and I forget which the third county intact, and then Columbus, which is in Franklin County, will need to be split because I believe Columbus has over 800,000 population, and so that county will be split up.
It's possible that a small bit of Hamilton County will be broken off and put with Warren or Claremont or something. It's just that from now on, whoever draws those maps is limited to how many times they can do that.
Right.
And so,
There is a question in the chat.
yeah, I saw it.
You see it, Pat?
Yeah, and I don't know what the answer, but I will check the chat. The question in the chat was, hello, I've never given testimony before in my life, but I'm considering screwing up my courage to do so going forward. Can anyone offer guidance on how to do this? Are there YouTube videos or other information?
Yes, and actually, the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition had a session last night, and I anticipate that they'll probably be repeating some of this. I'll quickly read you some of the quick tips on testimony that they sent out yesterday. They said shorter is better. Be prepared for questions. Highlight where you're from and what Senate, House, and district you live in. Why the State House and legislative decisions matter to you, and say why fair maps matter to you. And then two of the links, excuse me, that Alice had put in the chat for the August 19th sessions on preparing testimony would be a good way to begin learning how to craft your testimony. And I know there will be more sessions that are going to be presented. And if you sign up for any of the things that are going to be in the list in the email that you get, the follow-up email that you get, as Pat mentioned earlier, you'll begin getting emails with more and more information about how you can get involved. And I anticipate creating testimony is going to be a hot item going forward.
Yes, this affects absolutely everything. You know, everything from, gun control laws to water runoff from the farms to Lake Erie to everything. Any particular issue you can think of is affected by whether or not our districts are gerrymandered.
Yeah, absolutely. I see my friend Jean Nightingale here, and we've been talking a lot about plastic and PFAS pollution. And as Pat was saying, this affects every aspect of our lives. And so we really have a right to choose our legislators and have a voice in creating and protecting our democracy and our environment and our healthcare and our protections from violence and the integrity of our communities. So this is such an important issue.
Or worse still, nothing gets done.
Yes.
You know, I mean, how long has it taken to get this infrastructure bill passed? And meanwhile, the Ben Spence Bridge is falling apart into the river. There's a question in the chat here. Is it possible Cleveland could be split into 3 districts? It's possible. According to the laws, they can split up to 5 counties in Ohio into 3 districts. And so they up to that amount. So yeah, it is possible that they could split, let's see, 5. Cleveland, they're going to have to split Franklin. Okay, because that's Columbus. Franklin, Cleveland, Cuyahoga, Hamilton, what's the next? Montgomery. You know, they could split up to 5 into 3 districts. But then they wouldn't be able to split any other ones up. And it would get really, really hard, you know, to, I mean, they can't do the whole state just by county by county by county by not splitting anything. And if they split, you know, if they're promiscuous with their splits, you know, with the largest, there's going to be some real weird problem that they're going to have in Appalachia or someplace where they're not going to be able to create a district with the right number of people without splitting something, and you've already used up your splits. You know, so there's that problem. Plus, again, going back, this is transparent. When they're done, they have to justify what they've done. There are people just waiting in the wings to do lawsuits. You know, and again, keeping their feet to the fire. If this passed with over 70% of the vote twice in every single Ohio county, people are beginning to realize how utterly important this is. And we just had to let them know we had to let them know. So yeah, it is possible that they could split Cuyahoga 3 times, but there's a limited number of counties they can do that to. And they're really going to paint themselves in a corner somewhere else if they do it.
And I totally agree with what Pat has said. And it is overwhelming or remarkable to think that over 70% of Ohioans voted twice to demand redistricting. And yet I'm still touched by and moved by when I was collecting signatures for the 2018 referendum. I was in over the Rhine district in Cincinnati for a Main Street festival. And I went up to a young woman in her 30s and I explained all about the petition and to end gerrymandering. And she said, "No, I'm the president of the Over the Rhine Republican Club, and we love gerrymandering." And she turned away and walked away. And I thought, well, okay, I found my first person who loves gerrymandering, even those over 70% of the rest of Ohio.
I find it somewhat amusing because when I was in Indiana, I was involved in this back, and this I guess would have been back in 2011 or 2010 or whenever. Or maybe it was even 2000 because I was in Indiana for a long time. We were fighting, you know, against, you know, for this kind of reform there, and it was the Democrats that opposed us because Indiana was trending more and more Republican, and the Democrats were keeping a tight hold on the legislature only by gerrymandering the Republicans into obscurity. You know, and we couldn't get We could not get decent reform there. And then it came back to bite the Democrats because finally Indiana went Republican enough that they took control of the legislature anyway. And because the reforms were never passed, you know, so it comes, even your friend in the Over the Rhine, you know, it comes back to bite, you know, the party.
Right.
So I just find it interesting because we were accused of being rabid Republicans when we were in what Common Cause was when we were in Indiana, and we were accused of being Democrats here, and we're not either. This is vital for both political parties. It's vital for our democracy. Small d.
Are there any other questions that are, yes, Claire.
Claire.
Is there someplace where you can go and look at, say, the top 5 or 10 most likely maps right now? I'm sure people are drawing them even before we have the census information. We can get sort of an idea of what Hamilton County is going to look like.
I don't think so.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The only thing I could think of, Pat, is to participate in the community mapping or maybe connect
I
up
don't
with.
even think that is for a different thing. The thing of it.
Can I throw just one idea out here?
Yeah.
Is what I've heard from several people is, since Hamilton County's population is about 820,000 and a district will have about 720,000, most of Hamilton County will be entirely within one district, probably called the first district. And they will carve out a piece of Hamilton County with about 100,000 people, probably the southeast part of the county, to include Brad Wenstrup's home in Columbia, Tusculum, and link that with Claremont County and Brown and Adams and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they'll take a little piece somewhere and they'll stick it with Claremont.
Yeah, Pat, you laughed, but at one point they had divided the district so that Willis Gradison's home was included in a section of it many years ago.
Yeah. So I mean, if the population of Hamilton County is 800, they're going to have they take a little piece off of it somewhere. And I don't think that's a bad idea, provided that they do it according to how people in that area really feel best represents their interests. You know, if the majority of the people in Columbia, Tusculum are, would prefer, are they being consulted? Do they have a chance to stand up and say, wait a minute, no, we don't want that?
And that's the power of the public hearings, and to let people know, educate people about them, and publicize when they're going to happen, and be able to give that kind of input too.
Because again, if you take too many, if you say, oh my goodness, Hamilton County is going to be Democrat, let's take as many Republicans out of it. They won't be able to take all the Republicans in Hamilton County out. And well, that'll do is it'll crack the Republicans, and they'll never, we need two viable parties as much as possible in every district, so we can have some decent compromises, some decent discussion of issues. You know what I mean? And if we pick out, I'm making this up, 3 little Republican townships or something somewhere, and stick them with, nice Republican, I don't know, Warren County or Claremont County or something. The rest of it makes Hamilton County bluer, and then we've got the same problem, if that makes any sense. And it is not good for our democracy. It's why our Congress isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
And it's why people that you and I may think are absolutely crazy. Excuse me, I don't know, maybe somebody here likes Marjorie Taylor Greene and thinks she's a really wise woman and everything. And I really don't know her, so I shouldn't use her as an example. But you know, there are, I don't know who they all are, but I have heard people say that there are people in Congress who aren't there to make laws. They're just there to grandstand and show how radically left or radically right they are. This is not good for our democracy.
There are a couple questions in the chat.
Oh, good. What are they?
Has any other state tried what Ohio is doing? Not first
Not in
one.
this way, no.
There are
Yeah.
commissions, though. There are independent
Yes.
commissions in California
Yes.
and
Maine,
some
I
other,
think. I think it's Maine, but don't quote me. It might not be.
yeah.
Yeah, there are
And-
some separately commissions that are deliberately structured
Yeah.
to be nonpartisan or bipartisan that don't have any of the legislators that are the currently elected officials that will benefit, in them. And California is one. But it was,
And California didn't work out perfectly. It was, from what I read here and there, that some of the people on the commission were still pretty somewhat partisan, but
yeah.
it
it's
was
hard.
better.
It was better. It was thought that this was against the Ohio Constitution and that we couldn't do it. So.
And there is an article that I read in preparing for being part of the Speakers Bureau, and I would need to go back. I think it might be the National Conference on State Legislatures research on redistricting, where they did a comparison of where, given the 2020 census and where the various states are with their redistricting measures, they did divide states up into categories, and Ohio falls into the category of states that have a constitutional amendments or constitutional requirements guiding their redistricting. I know that article is included in the set of links that you'll be receiving for as a follow-up. But it was really interesting that there are several states that are similar, but not exactly like Ohio.
And again, we're better than Wisconsin. We're better off than Wisconsin is,
Right.
because
And we're
Wisconsin
not as
didn't.
well off as some of the states that have a neutral, separate
Yeah.
redistricting commission that is not made up of elected officials. So, we have, a mix. It's a mixed bag.
And ours is only as good as we are involved and keep making it good.
Mhm. Mhm. And I'm also intrigued by Claire's question about, are there some sample maps that have already been drawn of what we can anticipate? And I don't know of any myself, but I would like to, what I'm going to do is to talk with some of the leaders of fair districts and see if they might know of any. And then I'll send that to either Beth or Amy, and maybe they could get that information to you. I think it's a a great idea if we can start looking at, and then I think we can start speaking more clearly ourselves about what we would like to see happen as far as our own districts are concerned, if we can look at some of these samples. Good.
Yeah.
Dot, do you want to explain your question? Hasn't someone made a computerized map with new rules for a starter? What
Well, it seems to me with all the artificial intelligence out there and at the universities, that somebody would have plugged in all the rules and said, okay, make the map, and see, which ones fit easily into a single county and which ones would be easily adjacent counties, and what 2 or 3 different versions perhaps of what would happen in the cities in Columbus and Cincinnati and Cleveland. It just seems to me that somebody out there's probably already done that, and it'd be lovely to see an
Yes.
example.
It's one of the
You're-
things that we did in Indiana a decade ago. We had, and you watched, they had a whole map of the state and you could go in it. It was very interactive. And you could say, well, if we move the boundaries between these 2 districts in this way, this is what happens. It was addictive.
Well,
And,
and if you had that, you could say, well, gee, there's 65 or 14 or 13 districts that we don't have to worry about. They're pretty easy, pretty contiguous and follow all the rules. But then there's these 4 or 5 districts that there are options for, and you don't have to worry about the rest of them.
Yes, and Dot, exactly what you're saying is possible to create. And yet, as Pat mentioned earlier in the presentation, redistricting is an opportunity for a power grab. And so just as we can create equitable, fair maps like you're describing, it's also possible for someone to create maps according to how they think they can best benefit politically. And that's why we had the ballot initiatives to, mandate rules to make sure that what you're saying, Dot, will happen rather than the, I guess, perversion, corruption, or distortion and gerrymandered maps.
We can ask, though, as an entity, so we can ask like Gene Henderson and some of the folks on Fair Districts, if any of those maps exist, then can we look at them?
Well,
Right.
if I'm going to draw a map, I'd like to have, 60 or 70% of it kind of be non-questionable because somebody's already figured out that works the way it should work. And then I only have to worry about the ones that I'm trying to make fair, or if I'm trying to be partisan about it, looking at how I'd want to do it. But it seems to me a lot of it would be pretty much non-controversial, a lot of counties.
Just so people know, the map making sessions that were being offered prior to tomorrow were just maps of what you thought your community was.
Correct.
You weren't obligated to figure out anything beyond your personal purview.
Right.
Smart.
Jean, do you want to explain your question? Would it be even more?
I was just wondering if we could, what if you just, I'm just using my imagination here a little bit. What if you draw the lines totally arbitrarily, like a checkerboard or something like that? Would it not end up being more fair than if you kind of strategically work around Republicans and Democrat voters? I don't know.
It would, if you did it arbitrarily, if you just, laid a checkerboard on the state or something, it would split up communities,
Yeah.
and also the reforms that were passed mandated certain things. One of which was the counties have to be kept intact, or at least for 60 some of them. And so you can't just draw them arbitrarily, because you have to follow county lines in at least 66 of the 88 cases.
That's right.
So we can't, constitutionally now, those are part of the Constitution now, we can't do it.
Yeah, I just was wondering.
But statistically, statistically, yes, if you could just draw lines to such, and it might turn out fairer, but it would also chop up a whole lot of things that really should not be chopped up.
Yeah. Difficult.
Very. I just remember that addictive Indiana thing, and we could move this boundary here. Oh no, that thinks this over here. Because then if you did that, then all of the other counties modified themselves so that the number of people were equal. It was frustrating and addictive at the same time.
Well, in order to honor your time, unless there are any other questions, how would you like to proceed from here? Beth?
Well, I would like to thank you both, Pat and Antoinette. You are obviously very dedicated volunteer advocates, and you're making a huge difference. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your time and all your efforts and educating us tonight. And we have plenty of links to follow up, and you'll all be getting an email from Women City Club. So you can look forward to that and take action.
And we hereby volunteer our group of volunteers. If any of you are connected to any other group, a church group, a local neighborhood group, or whatever, and you would like someone from Fair Districts to come and talk to you, please feel free to let us know.
Excellent. And you can look forward to more forums in the fall about with candidates for mayor and council and et cetera. So we will stay on voting topics probably for the next couple months. So thank you again, everyone.
It was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. It
Thank
was
you.
really fun.